Okay, great. So this is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a long time because this has affected my life for a long time. And, even when you have imposter syndrome, it's really hard to do anything about it. Because I know I sabotage myself all the time. And I know what I'm thinking isn't true, but I still let it seep in and affect everything that I do. So I'm excited for this. So I'll just hand it over to you if that's all right, Brian.
Sure thing. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a conversation.
Yeah.
Alice and I have talked a couple times in the past, so she knows kind of how I roll. I believe that dialogue is one of the best teachers. Monologuing is good for the person doing the talking. They get to hear their own voice and feel smart for however long.
Yeah.
But the people that we're talking with are the ones that are the ultimate beneficiaries of the conversation. We want to make sure that people understand what it is you're trying to convey and are able to implement what it is you're suggesting to them.
Yeah.
So the best way to accomplish that is to see how things are landing. Yeah. So before kind of getting into all that, we need to start on as much of the same page as possible. So if we're talking about imposter syndrome, what are we talking about? When you think of that, how do you describe it to someone?
I see it as a self-sabotage type of thing. So you might have, like in my case, in my day job in particular, I have all the qualifications that you could need, all the experience, but when it comes to it, I still think, oh, my other co-workers know better than me. They'll be able to do it better than me. So I never put myself up for doing anything. So like when I was put into a senior role, I always used to think, why have they done that? Why haven't they picked somebody else? And so I see it as not knowing or not seeing your own worth, I suppose, and not seeing what other people see, and then just sabotaging myself after that.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, similar. So like kind of working against your own potential. If you do so well, it's like you've got a bit of a glass ceiling on how good things can be. And then if you break it, then your ego or trauma or inner critic, whatever you want to call it, will stop you from getting just a bit further, because there's a core wound somewhere that says we don't get to have as much as we want or can achieve as much as we want. So it gets a bit nervous when you get to like new territory kind of thing, I find.
One of the most difficult things about imposter syndrome is the fact that it sets up these arbitrary criteria for inclusion. You can belong to our group when you meet these criteria, when you have this degree, if you've gone to this school, if you have these credentials, and it's all just bluster. It's a myth. It's manufactured. And this is something that really comes, I think, out of the corporate structure, where it's all about status and promotion and the big bonus. And it's because of our very capitalistic Western culture, it's bled over into everything, where you're always looking to one up your posture or your position. And you also want to make sure other people know exactly where you stand. So sometimes you're trying to keep them low while keeping yourself up. And it's not about reciprocity, camaraderie, collaboration. It's about competition. So when you have imposter syndrome, you immediately are setting yourself up in a competitive relationship with the people you're comparing yourself to. We're in competition and you are ahead. You're smarter, you're better, you're more qualified. And I'm forever behind you because of these criteria that in my mind, I need to meet in order to be good enough. So when you think about any group right now that you feel you are about to be found out in some way, it's just a matter of time, right? That's part of the classic self-talk that goes along with it. If they only knew what a fraud I was. So when you think of the group that you're currently in, when you're comparing yourself to the people that you are not good enough to be in the company of, What do you say to yourself you are not measuring up to?
Hmm. Well, I can use BBS as an example. So Claire, BBS is a business community group thing that some of us are a part of. And I feel intimidated a lot of the time. I'm yet to speak in BBS, like on one of the mastermind calls or anything. I go to them.
Well, you and I are
but-
going to have a little accountability arrangement, I think.
Oh no. I'm in Hannah's group as well, and I feel different in Hannah's group, and I don't know why. Maybe because there's less people. But I just look at everybody else and they seem, it's not necessarily true, but they seem like they're further along than I am. So then I don't really have anything to bring into any of the conversations. And I suppose I probably do have questions to ask that I could ask at the mastermind, but I don't do it. I just listen to everybody else's instead.
So do you think there's something about the way you ask questions or the kind of questions you would ask that would somehow be unworthy of the type of question asking culture in BBS? Because we're all asking questions all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering why you have decided you don't qualify as someone who's allowed to ask questions.
I suppose it's not that I don't feel like I can't, because everybody's, great. It's not so much of an intimidation thing, and that maybe I feel like my question is just going to be silly and that I should just know it anyway, because it's obvious.
Yeah.
So then I don't ask, because I just wait and see if somebody else will first.
Okay. Growing up, was there somebody who always accused you of having no common sense?
I had a teacher once who didn't like me, and said that I used to copy other people's work when in reality it was the other way around. They were copying mine. But I did get removed from that situation quickly because I got sent to a different school because of that, because my mum couldn't get me to go to school after that. So I suppose in the back of my mind somewhere, I always feel like maybe they're going to think I'm getting these questions from somebody else, maybe that they're not my own questions. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
One thing to declare for yourself is I ask questions so I don't need to stay where I am.
Yeah.
So if somebody were to say, oh, that's dumb, that's a silly
Yeah.
question, you should know that already. Everybody knows that. Okay, well, until now, I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm asking questions because I want to know so that I can move forward.
And I know no one's going to say that to me. No one's going to tell me that's a stupid question.
But here's the thing, you're saying it to you.
I know, yeah. Yeah.
That's where the imposter syndrome comes from, is you've picked up assumptions and beliefs about the hoops you need to jump through in order to be good enough to be included.
Yeah.
So identifying those beliefs, assumptions, decisions, the decision that you don't belong.
Yeah.
So you can look and say, wow, I'm an outsider here.
Yeah.
And that decision is going to make it difficult for you to mingle.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have found that really flips the paradigm on imposter syndrome is, instead of showing up to prove something, show up curious.
Yeah.
You're there to find out who the people are and what they need.
Yeah.
Because you might not have an idea of how you can meet their need right then and there, but maybe something will occur to you later and you can follow up with them.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you are showing up to, at least in my philosophy, reduce the suffering of those in your presence.
Yeah.
Improve their confidence, their level of empowerment, whatever it is. And it doesn't take you showing up with an entourage to accomplish that, or having the best suit. It's about how effective you are at seeing somebody else, listening to them, making sure they know that they are the most important thing in that moment. Speaking of the Queen, even though I know we weren't, when people were talking about their experience with her, one thing that stood out was that she understood people meeting her might have been looking forward to that moment their entire life. It's a big deal to meet the queen. So one thing she'd make a point of doing is to greet them as though it were equally exciting for her.
Yeah.
And man, I can't tell you how many people just treat their admirers like a bother. And this was her life for 70 years, and she still found a way to show up and create that experience.
Yeah.
If you can do that for somebody else, the last thing they're going to ask for is your resume.
Yeah. True.
So belonging is about bringing some value to someone else's life by elevating the situation you're in.
Yeah.
You know, the reason why, well, I don't understand European football. I don't know the different positions, but in American football, it's like having only quarterbacks. Right? A bunch
Yeah.
of people on the line, they all want to throw the ball. They're all fighting for it. No, you need different abilities.
Yeah.
And when you are surrounded by a competitive mindset, I'm not talking about BBS because it's very collaborative, but other environments where it's about who's the smartest kid in the room, who looks the most professional. That's one of those conversations that's ongoing, right? What's professional, what isn't?
Yeah.
My brain tangented a moment.
Okay.
Let me stop talking for a little bit. I've thrown a lot out there.
Okay.
Feedback, questions, aha moments.
Alice?
No, yeah, no, I agree. Like with what Natalie was saying, but like I was thinking of the other side then, because it's like I kind of feel the same sometimes, but then also it's like when someone does ask a question in those groups and I can answer it, it kind of makes me feel more like a sense of sort of like, oh, okay, I know the answer to this, so I can help.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel good because I can like help that person as well. So kind of like another viewpoint to it, I suppose.
One thing I remember, because I have a master's in social work, and one of the things that I remember kind of salivating over right off the bat was the jargon, the terms, right? Because you hear doctors talk to each other and it's all Latin. You have no idea what these people are saying to each other. And when they write the prescriptions, you have even less idea what they're signing on the paper, right? But there is this kind of wink, this handshake, this jargon they have amongst themselves. So one thing you can do as you're getting to know your group is just listen to them talk to each other.
Yeah.
You know, what's the kind of stuff they're throwing around? You don't necessarily know the answer, Alice, but the more familiar you become with what are the subjects we discuss? What about those subjects? What terms do we use? Now you can begin recognizing the conversation and you can at least nod your head, say, yeah, I was just reading about that. I'm glad you brought that up. And you're supporting the listener as opposed to trying to be the one who's commanding the stage.
Yeah.
There are other ways to belong, to contribute, and it isn't always about having eyes on you. And when you look at how things are encouraged, what are we all taught we need to be? We have to be an influencer, right? Have to be the number one, the go-to person. Well, that's all fine and good, but that's not the only position on the field. You know, you could be, let's say you're at a buffet. You guys have buffets over there?
Yeah.
Yes.
And depending on how big the buffet is, you might have somebody at like the salad station, and then somebody is at the omelet station, and you move down the line. So what if somebody were to say, oh, well, if I can't be the last one, you know, who gets to ring up the money, well, then why am I even here? Because they think one position is more important than another, when each one is important in the person's journey. You know, you might not be the one to solve the person's problem, but you may be the one to show them enough kindness to remind them that they're worth it.
True.
So they keep going and they find the person who will eventually help them.
Yeah.
Being an imposter is so much about comparison and believing that the person you're comparing yourself to, simply because they are maybe further down the road, that they are therefore better. and you are less, why are those even the criteria that you're using?
I don't
What
know.
if you use the criteria of teacher and student?
Yeah, it's difficult because I find a lot of the time I'm comparing myself to people who aren't actually in a better position than me. I seem to I accept the people who are further along, as though they've done the work, they're in that position because they've done the work. It's more people who are either at the same level as me or just below. So say, like, I gave the example of my day job before, where I was put in a senior position and then there was people underneath, so to speak. But I would still always see them as they probably still know more than I do anyway. I've just been put in that position because maybe I've been there longer, or I don't see what other people see. And it doesn't matter how many times they tell me, I still don't believe it.
So what kind of results are you required to produce for your employer?
At the time, I'm not in the senior position anymore because I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. It wasn't worth the stress. But at the time, I was responsible for. It was in a care home. I was senior carer, responsible for the other carers, making sure that they were doing the job that they were supposed to do. So I guess the outcomes were making sure they did paperwork, looked after the residents to the standard that was required. So those were my outcomes, really, making sure that they were doing their job properly.
And it sounds like that's not a role you were comfortable being in.
Not really, because I don't like telling other people what to do, because I don't like being told what to do. So
Wait a minute. It's not that I disagree with you, but I want to make
go on.
sure that we
Yeah.
hit a layer of this.
Yeah,
It's not only that you don't like being told what to do, you don't like being told you did something wrong.
true. Yeah, I hate that.
And-
I can't take that at all. I will think about that for years. Absolutely, not just at that time. Years I'll think about it for.
Because when you were little, you took everything personally. So
Yeah.
if someone said you did something wrong, it meant
Yeah.
you're wrong.
Yeah,
You are defective, you're broken. And rarely does it occur to them to go back and heal that.
yeah,
It's so common for all of us to have that it keeps sticking its butt into our business far too often and sabotaging us when we're trying to make progress. Because here we know better, but emotionally, we're still afraid.
yeah.
We're afraid of being rejected, hurt, and that's the part that
Mm.
really messes things up.
Yeah.
I was going to say something, but I need a reminder what we were talking about like a minute ago.
I said, what did I say? I can't remember either now.
Well,
Yeah, we're talking
until
about
there is one
done
thing I want to ask you
something
about your job.
not being
until
like
I
no,
remember.
not liking what you're being told to do, but being told you're doing something.
fundamentally
That's right.
wrong.
Thanks, Alice. There are times where a person feels like if you're telling me what to do, you are taking my power of choice away from me.
Yeah,
And you don't get to do that.
yeah,
And there are people that will say what you ought to do, what you should do. This is what I would do if I were you. And they're pretty much imposing their will upon you.
yeah,
It's understandable if you want to push back against that and say, hey, it's my decision.
yeah,
But if someone's just saying, one thing you could try, or perhaps you'd consider this, they're not telling you what to do under those circumstances. They're brainstorming with you.
yeah,
But if you begin to push back because it wasn't your idea and only your ideas are worthy of implementation,
mm,
then that's much more about you are afraid of being out of control.
yeah,
Then that also means you don't feel safe trusting other people, because if you could take their advice,
yeah,
but it's too dangerous. So there's probably some kind of attachment thing going on there too.
probably, yeah. And I didn't want to be responsible for them not doing their job properly and then it being my fault because I didn't want to be the one being told you're not doing your job properly then if they're not doing their job properly.
And of course, supervisors want to make it seem like it's just a big piece of cake. It's
Yeah.
purely transactional. You just walk up and say, hey, just wanted to remind you. And there's going to be no attitude. This person's not going to have any emotional baggage whatsoever. It's going to go completely smooth. And everybody's going to sing Kumbaya at the end of the shift.
Mm,
Right? That's always how it works.
no.
But when you realize how many people are walking through life trying to measure up, spitball a number. How many people do you think are living like that?
More than there isn't.
Right?
4 out
99,
of 5.
99.99999. Because we're bombarded daily with messages telling us we're not good enough,
Yeah.
especially women. Right? Do you have this new hair color? Do you have the latest, blush or
being
whatever
taught
they're
to
trying to say?
being taught to compete is intrinsic with growing up as a little girl into a woman. We're taught to compete and be suspicious of each other and in competition. Totally, it's one of the main messages we receive.
I'll tell you something. I was watching a comedian the other night, and he said there are more women on the world. They all have the right to vote, but the reason they can't make anything happen is because they're too busy trying to destroy each other.
Mm,
We've
yeah.
had that message given to us to do that for sure,
Well, my
because they know,
membership,
the patriarchy knows how powerful an awakened female society would be, how healed and beneficial it'd be to the collective.
one of my slogans in my membership is down with the patriarchy,
Yeah,
because of all the conditioning that women are subjected to that teach them that if they were to show them full selves and be their full selves, that they would somehow be repellent, off-putting.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
patriarchy hurts men just as much in different ways. Like, it's not, the patriarchy isn't a friend to the awakened man in any way.
Mm,
And neither one of those, the patriarchy or any kind of conditioned way of being, is a very compartmentalized version of yourself. It's like you can only show this in public. You can't show this, you can't talk about that. It's been a while, but I used to get a lot of
Frozen.
messages from other counselors because of how open I am about what I talk about. I talk about my own problems. I talk about them very vulnerably and
Videos
openly.
frozen.
And
Oh.
that wasn't professional.
What did you say? It's frozen.
Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
It might just be you.
Okay. As
I
long as
can-
you can,
I
hear me,
I
thank
can see you
goodness.
now. I can see you now.
Okay.
Excellent. Trust
Yeah.
me, hearing me is a far superior experience than seeing. So if you got that, then we're good. That's called self-deprecating humor.
Yeah. It is true though about women, because I put a post up the other day saying that a couple of years ago somebody said to me that I was sad and pathetic because all I do is sit in my room and write books, and that was from a woman.
Wow.
Yeah. It's never been a man who said you can't do that. It's always been women who've said to me, who do you think you are, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Internalize
the who do you think you are is a dead giveaway.
Mm,
Who are you to make me feel inferior?
yeah.
Who are
If I
you to be the
do
one to
what I
follow
do.
through on the thing that I kept saying, oh, I'm going to do that one day, but you actually did it.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Got a little jealousy going here.
Yeah. That kind of stuff doesn't help with the imposter syndrome though, because it really touches your nerve, doesn't it? When you already think that, who are you to do
The inner
it?
critic,
anyway?
the inner
Yeah,
critic
because
does backfire
inside
you as well,
you're
doesn't it?
thinking, who am I? And they're
Yeah.
actually saying to you, well, who do you think you are? You're like,
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
see, that is a really cool question and a very important one. Just that word, who.
Mm.
Who am I? Who do I think I am? I'm one of these people. I'm an attorney, or I'm an influencer, or I'm part of this membership. That status thing again.
Yeah.
What if how you thought of yourself had nothing to do with the groups that you belong to?
Mm.
Mm.
Yes.
What if instead it had to do with the experiences you brought to the table. If you showed up, you were known as the person that was kind.
Yeah.
You were known as the good listener. That's your contribution. It's not about sitting there with a little clicker. Okay, how many smart things did she say? All right, I'm ahead by 10.
Yeah. Mm.
You think about the experience that you're creating. People are going to attribute that experience to you. And like the old saying about, well, the Queen was a little different, but people taking stock of your stuff, right? Oh, I remember how Joe had the nicest car, always ran faster than mine. He made me look like a total bitch, but that was Joe.
Mm.
He's my buddy. People don't sit there admiring your stuff unless, of course, they're very status driven and that's how they define their worth. They're going to remember the experiences they had with you.
Yeah.
And no one can do it like you do it because you're the one doing it.
Mm. Yeah.
And one thing that I've learned, I like finding a language that disarms this either or mindset that we have. You know, it's either good or bad, you're right or wrong, you're in or you're out.
Yeah.
So if someone says, oh, well, I'm trying to think of the example I had. Oh, my way is better. Oh, yes, I can see your way is different. I saw this wonderful meme the other day that said, one size fits no one. Because you have the old one size fits all, right? These very cookie cutter courses or classrooms that we have. One size fits no one. So if they say, well, you know, my way is better, I'm glad it works better for you. I'd like to experiment and discover and find what's going to work for me. And then when I find what works for me, it'll help me be better. But it's not necessarily what will help you be better.
Yeah.
So you are allowed to walk your path, they're allowed to walk theirs, and you're not in competition with one another. You have a similar goal that you both want to be better, you want to have greater expertise, but you're moving on your own path at your own time. One thing you'd mentioned earlier, do you go by Natalie, Natster?
Anything. Yeah, and that's
What's your-
fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Is thinking that, well, they're farther ahead than me, I should already be there. That's very similar to someone who's in their last year of secondary school and someone who's in their first.
Mm.
Well, you started earlier than me. That's no excuse. I should be right where you are. Because I'm impatient, because I'm comparing.
Yeah.
And I believe that somewhere in my head that it must have been easy for that person to get where they are. And if I were to try it, it'd be hard for me. And since it's going to be hard for me, and it's hard for me because I'm dumb, I'm uneducated, whatever reasons you come up with, and then you talk yourself out of the permission to take the same chances on yourself.
Yeah. It's easy to be in victim mode if you think like that.
Victim mode is
Like,
safe.
oh, well, someone's got something more than I have, but it's true enough that incredibly wealthy people have got a massive head start against everybody else, like people that have everything, like all doors open to them. But yeah, the only person I'm in competition with is my previous self.
And are you even in competition, or are you in a process of self-discovery?
Yeah, most definitely. Never ending, is it?
Not
never
even
done.
for a moment. Because life is dynamic. It's always happening. There's always motion. Whether we can perceive it with our different senses or not. In fact, we're always responding. Have anybody here heard the stat that you have anywhere from 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
another
me
person,
and Natalie have like 90,000 then.
Of the same
Oh.
thoughts as well. Yeah.
now I'll tell you, the majority of them are the same you had yesterday, because we're running these scripts that keep us in our habits.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that only 5%, and again, this is an estimate, I don't know how they measure this stuff, only 5% are actually within your conscious control.
Yeah.
All
like
the thoughts in your head. So
Yeah.
when I see all this nonsense saying the only thing you have control over are your thoughts, wrong.
Mhm.
You have say in maybe 5%, but the vast majority of them are just popping up because your brain's reacting to stuff.
Yeah.
That's a burn. That was loud. Man, it's cold out. Wow, I got to remember to pay that bill. This stuff just popping in all day long. And not every thought needs your attention, but they're in there making noise. So
It's the difference between neurotypical brains and brains on trauma or neurodivergence. Like there's a processing issue for some people that like, so I'll hear every noise in a room and it'll overwhelm me sometimes. My dad, his brain will just dismiss them. It won't matter to him. It's like what you can filter out, what's like your sensitivities and stuff.
he can ignore things. I don't know if he realizes just how lucky he is. As my brain just hears everything. It takes nothing to wake me up.
Sorry, the video's gone choppy. I can't hear anything.
Is that me? Am I the
No,
one?
it's you,
Okay.
Claire.
She's out there in,
Yeah.
in the woods.
It's come back now.
Yeah.
Trying to remember where my thinking was. But what's locking in with you in terms of, yeah, I can look at it that way and I can see how that would be helpful?
Well, you said, and what Alice said as well, about where I don't need to be asking any questions. I can be listening and helping other people if I have the answer. So it doesn't really matter if I turn up and contribute talking wise and asking a question. I can still contribute what I know to somebody else if they need help.
Is that what you meant, Alice?
Yeah, I suppose. And what I like that you said was like, sorry, I got a bit of a cough. It was like focusing on the things like, you know, you were kind that day, or you said something that like had an influence on them that day, or you could help them that day. And it's like, people have said to me like, oh yeah, the way you come across is so nice and you're so patient. And it's like, but I sort of don't take those things in. I'm kind of like, oh, was that answer stupid? Or did I do that right? Or like, did I explain that well enough? Or like, are they going to come back and be like, oh, this didn't work and that was just wrong? And I'm like the best person at like catastrophizing things, especially before I do something.
I don't imagine anyone here can relate to that.
Like before I had to have like a conversation, like say it's a client or somebody, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna think this, they're gonna say that, oh my gosh, you're gonna go so wrong. Like, I'm the best person at like making up scenarios and making up like the worst case scenario. And that has probably never turned out like as bad as I can make out that it's going to. Do you like when somebody says to you like, oh, I need to speak to you, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do they need to speak to me about?
You know what? Even at my age, I say to people, don't do that. I say, I need to have some idea what we're going to be talking about, or my weekend is ruined.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, oh, it's nothing big. It's just this. Okay, thank you. Yeah. It's much better than, hey, when you got a minute, I really need to talk, but I'm not available for the next 5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll work really well.
How many crazy stories do you mind come up with in 5 hours?
Yeah.
I could probably write my own Harry Potter. I would need to have somebody sitting here just typing down everything that was rattling out of my mouth. And then it jumped off a cliff, and then their wings didn't sprout, and then they hit the rocks below, and it would just be this big horror flick. But back to what you were saying before, Alice, about focusing on the experience you want to give them. When you're being kind, when you're listening, how self-conscious are you in those moments?
Not really. I don't really realize that I'm sort of doing it, because they say, oh, I was really nice, and I'm like, oh, was it? Because I'm in my head, I'm probably thinking, oh my gosh, I sound like an idiot.
Any idea why you weren't as self-conscious? Who are you paying attention to?
Them, not me.
Yeah. When you're self-conscious, it's all about you. How's my hair? Am I dressed right? Is there a stain on my shirt?
Yeah.
Did what I say just sound dumb? Was that a good question? You're thinking about, how am I being perceived? What's their experience of me?
Mhm.
But if you flip it and you focus on what is their experience, how do you say it? How well are you conveying your experience of them? So when you're saying things like, that's really interesting. Oh, I didn't know that. Being a very attentive listener. Again, making sure that they feel connected with, they feel heard. Can you imagine them walking away from that experience with you thinking, man, she was a bitch. She listened to me the whole time and cared about what I had to say.
No.
I imagine they'd have warm feelings to you, and not because you asked the smartest questions or because you used the biggest words. It was because you were a quality human being to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're going to say, I can't accept your kindness. You don't have a PhD. They're not going to do that to you. They're going to be grateful that they encountered another human being and not somebody who just obviously wanted something from them.
Mm.
You can get so much mileage from just being a humble, caring human being.
Mm.
Because Lord knows
true.
I'm not going to win any races. Unless it's who can fall down the steps the fastest. So thoughts?
Yeah, I think feeling useful is really important. Like you've got a purpose. So when you are listening and helping other people, it's that gives you a sense of belonging too, because you're helping them, so you belong together. Like me and Claire, a couple of weeks back, she just joined, and our first mastermind, we didn't at all really talk about writing. We were just talking about our personal experiences, and that, and we gave each other, there was other people too as well, it's just that Claire's here now, but we were all giving each other advice and different perspectives of things. So when I came out of it, it didn't bother me that we didn't talk about writing. I was more happy that we talked about the other stuff, because it was important stuff to work through before we went on to writing, because we talked about all sorts, abuse, trauma, ADHD, all kinds of sensitive topics.
Conversations that people should be having, like,
Yeah,
all the time, really, like
Yeah.
actual meaningful connections.
yeah.
Well, girlfriend, you and I need to connect, because if you saw the stuff I wrote about,
Yeah,
it's all about the conversations we need to be having.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because I see what everybody's talking about, and so much of it is just these filters.
Mhm.
You know, oh, this is the trendy thing to care about, so I'll pretend that this is the most important thing in my life, all the while I'm not asking for what I need or talking about what I care about.
yeah,
And when it comes to writing, and thanks for that little reminder, writing is an opportunity for you to learn how to tell your own story.
Yeah.
And there's a member in my membership who wants to write a letter to a relative explaining, basically the hurt, and this is why I need to set boundaries with you, and our relationship needs to change. And she's having so much resistance, just the idea of writing it down. And I reminded her, not everything you write needs to be read by someone else. This is for you. At the very least, learn to put language to these complex human experiences. When you're telling your story out there to the masses, you're inviting them to consider whether your languaging is also good for them.
Yeah.
Is this how you would describe it? Is another word that you would use? You're inviting people into the story. By having the courage of telling your story, you give them permission to take a similar courageous step, because they've seen you do it and not die.
Yeah, definitely. It's about permission.
Yeah.
I had that with my first book. I was so scared to put it out because it tells such personal stuff. And I thought, I wasn't too much worried about being judged, because I say I don't care what other people think, but I kind of do, because otherwise I wouldn't have been worried about putting it out. But not to the extent where I didn't, and I did put it out in the end. And people just saying to me that your experience is exactly what my experience is, but I just couldn't tell anybody because I wasn't brave's the wrong word, but they didn't feel brave enough to do it, but they're going to do it now because they read that I had put it out there. So it gave them a permission to do it themselves, and they have. There's been people, and they've sent me that they've published books since, and that made it, because initially I did it for myself. I wrote the book for myself. It wasn't really to help other people, even though it turned out that way, obviously. But it
You
was
know what? That's
me.
that's one of the best reasons to write a book in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, and I just while I was writing it, I did realize it would help other people if they read it. But obviously, in my mind, no one was ever going to read it, because why would they read my book? But they did, and it helped people. And then people like Claire that I've connected with, from she's in a different group, telling parts of what were in my book is what attracted Claire into my world. And then that's where I found out how similar our stories are. So, it's important. And more people, that's what I want, is more people to write their stories, because it gives
Very
them
important.
I am right there with you. One thing that comes to mind as you were talking is how often people hide themselves away because they've been convinced that certain sides of themselves will risk them being disinvited, rejected. So we're taught you can't show all of yourself other than the desirable parts that make us happy and don't cause us any inconvenience. And that's all you're allowed to show. But those typically aren't the parts of you with all the needs.
No.
So the more you are able to talk about the more vulnerable stuff out in the open and make that normal to discuss, all of a sudden feeling like you're an imposter because you have all of these insecurities that maybe disqualify you, and everybody seems like they have it together when we know they're just masking.
Yeah.
It's an act, it's pretend.
Mm.
But then someone like you comes along and is demonstrating all of this vulnerability and demonstrating that, okay, this person is not being hog-tied and hauled out and thrown on the street because they were human.
Yeah.
Because they were other than professional. It takes someone to step up and say, I can be all of me and still belong here.
Yeah. A lot of the time people think that it's just an experience that's happening to them, and that couldn't possibly be happening to anybody else, and that we're just weird. It's just us. But then when you talk to other people, you find out it's not just you, and there's an awful lot of people in the same position.
It never ceases to amaze me how I will post something that I think is just kind of like meh, and then it blows up.
Yeah.
I did that a little while ago. I posted because someone contacted me saying, hey, do you do any work with gifted kids? Because this little girl is being bullied or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it reminded me of my oldest boy, who is really smart. He loves school.
Yeah.
He wanted to go to school when he was in bed with the flu because he didn't want to miss school. That's how much he likes school. So when he was bullied to the point that he didn't want to be there anymore and he wanted to kill himself, I knew I had to pull him out.
Yeah.
So I just made mention of the fact that, hey, somebody contacted me because they're gifted kids, so on, and my kid too. And the comments started coming.
Yeah, I saw that.
I didn't realize how familiar. I mean, I realized how common being socially awkward is because you're on the autism spectrum of ADHD,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize that giftedness was as relatable.
Mm.
But it all boils down to something about my difference makes it more difficult for me to connect with everyone else.
Yeah.
And that can be true for gifted kids as well as for kids that just have developmental challenges. Either way, something that should make me valuable is somehow a thorn in everyone else's side.
Mm.
So the teachers are saying, oh, you're so smart, blah, blah, blah. But then everybody else is making me feel like I'm a worthless piece of crap because they don't even see me.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you don't have to be the smartest kid in the class to befriend the smartest kid. Maybe you're just more kind and
Yeah.
more patient and more curious.
Yeah.
You can show up with that and you can be a high school dropout and you're in a room full of PhDs, but if you're a good listener, you will have their attention. They will remember you.
Yeah. Yeah. God.
Now, I know we could talk for hours.
I know. Yeah.
My brain, as you've noticed, because I have ADHD, I'm on the spectrum, I have dyslexia, I have dysgraphia, everything is very disjointed. So when I think of things, I tend to say, here's a puzzle piece that goes to the puzzle. Oh, here's another puzzle piece. As we're talking, hopefully we're able to bring them together
Yeah.
into some, cohesive path or
Yeah.
idea. So I try to accomplish that as much as I can, but I rely upon you to remind me what stood out for you. What do you take away?
Well, another thing with the imposter syndrome is what helped with that for me as well is telling my story and other people commenting the same, so that I don't feel like I'm different and that I've started a conversation that's going to help people, like what you've done today with your post. So that helps a little bit with the, yes, I do have something worthwhile to say because there's the proof. People have commented. So it's a lot better for me than it used to be, because otherwise I would never have started this membership, and I wouldn't have joined BBS and Hannah's. In the past, I'd have just thought, no, that's not me. It's not my time for that. So it's a work in progress all the time, and it's getting better.
Yeah, as long as you stay on it and you learn from it and you're honest about the opportunities to learn from the experiences you're having, as opposed to, holy crap, I hope no one finds out about that. That's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
But instead you can write about it.
Yeah.
Find the different angles, find the different language that'll make it much more accessible to you so you can see it as something that's humbling versus shaming.
Yeah.
So much of it has to do with the language that you choose, the meaning you assign to it.
Mm-hmm.
And as writers, we play with language in order to demonstrate all the different things that it can do. It can empower or it can instill fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just talking about the stories, it's how we talk about our story. How do we tell it? And that's a part of what can really get people excited about the possibility of allowing us to guide them a bit.
Yeah.
Of course.
My cat.
All mine are laying down someplace else. So I hope when you listen back to this recording, you're able to connect some of the dots and see how things.
Yeah, no, it's been really helpful and reframing a couple of things, how I go into looking at things and how I can change that.
And we're scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
These are some things to kind of help you move in that direction.
Yeah.
But getting started is
Well,
absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, thanks, everyone.
Anything? Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been a fun conversation. Thank goodness for caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate you coming.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. And you all go get some rest now.
Yeah. And you.
Oh, yeah, I will.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
All right,
Thanks,
you're welcome.
everyone. I'll see
Take
you
care.
tomorrow. We've got a write-in tomorrow if you're going to come 10 o'clock. Okay.
See you
Thank
there.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.